What would you do if the house you just inherited already had someone waiting at the door? It was just after 5 in the evening when the storm rolled in. Cold mountain wind, a wet smell in the air, and the sky dimming faster than it should. Nora hadn't planned to arrive this late, but the drive from the hospice center took longer than expected. The house was tucked far into the hills, trees pressing close on all sides. She cut the engine, let the silence settle. And then she saw him, an old dog, big, gray fur clumped with mud, sitting right on the porch like he lived there, like he'd been waiting just for her. He didn't bark, didn't move, just watched her through the downpour. When she stepped out of the car, keys clenched, he didn't flinch, just stared. Not aggressive, not afraid, just there, like a photograph that never faded. The wind picked up. Thunder rolled low. Nora hesitated. She was exhausted, emotionally flat. The past year had scraped her bare. Her father's death, a brother who vanished when she was 19, a marriage that ended with more silence than shouting. She wasn't here for sentiment, just a signature, maybe a night's sleep. Then back to the city, back to whatever normal meant now. The porch creaked under her weight. The dog stood as she approached, favoring his right leg. He looked ancient, torn ear, cloudy eyes, but steady. She unlocked the door. It groaned open. Dry air and dust spilled out. He slipped in beside her before she could speak. She let him. The house smelled like time. Wood, mildew, old books, and faint ash from a fireplace long gone cold. Furniture covered in sheets, floors stiff with dust. Her uncle's house. A man she hadn't seen in over 2 decades. A man who never reached out when her father passed. Just a letter, a will. The house was hers now, whether she wanted it or not. She set down her bag. The dog was already lying by the cold hearth like it was routine. His breathing was slow, heavy, like everything in the room had settled around him. She didn't have the energy to shoo him out. Not tonight. Upstairs, the rooms felt untouched. A bed with floral sheets. A desk stacked with unopened mail. In the hallway, a framed photo of 2 young boys, her uncle and her father, laughing beside a lake. She stood there too long. Her chest ached in that way that had no clear cause, just the ache of time. Back downstairs, the dog hadn't moved, but his eyes were open, watching her, not expecting anything, just present. She found an old bowl under the sink, rinsed it, poured some cereal into it. The dog sniffed, nudged it, ate slowly. She gave him a towel. He ignored it, curled into himself, and slept by the door instead. Outside, rain hit the roof like soft tapping fingers. Inside, silence. The next morning, sunlight pushed through the window slats. Nora stood on the porch, coffee in hand. She wasn't sure why. She made a second bowl of cereal. But the dog came from around the house like it was routine, limping but calm, like he'd done this 1,000 times, like the house was his. She didn't name him. Not yet. Later, as she cleaned out drawers, the dog followed her room to room. When she moved to the back of the hallway, he stopped, turned, right, waited by a closed door. The handle was stiff. She forced it open. Inside, an old study, paper stacks, framed records, a photo on the wall of her brother at 10, grinning beside her uncle. She hadn't seen it in years. The dog stepped. In first, sat under the desk, like it meant something. Nora didn't know what. That night, she found herself speaking aloud to him. Short thoughts, tossed words. He didn't respond, but he stayed nearby, always within sight, always quiet. On the third morning, she woke to scratching. Not loud, deliberate. The dog was at the far corner of the living room, pawing at the floor. She crouched, pulled up the edge of a loose board. Dust rose. Underneath, photos. Dozens. Her family, her uncle, her father, her brother. Some she had never seen. She sat with them for hours. The dog curled beside her, head resting against her leg. By evening, she cried for the first time in months. The next day, he led her again, this time to the cellar. The latch was stiff, but he whined until she opened it. It smelled like oil and cold. She descended slowly. One bulb buzzed overhead, shelves lined with boxes, but in one corner, something else. Letters. Dozens. Addressed to her brother. All unopened. All sent from her father. She sat on the step, breath shallow. The dog sat beside her. Quiet. Warm. This was no accident. He hadn't just been left behind. He'd stayed, waiting. The following days blurred into a rhythm neither of them spoke aloud. Morning mist over the hills, the sound of the kettle whistling, footsteps beside hers, always slow, always following. He never begged, never barked, just moved with her, like he knew what she was looking for, maybe even before she did. Nora found herself taking longer walks around the house. Trails lined the edges of the property, old, worn ones she hadn't noticed before. But the dog had. He waited by them each morning, sometimes standing at the edge like he was asking without asking. She followed. They passed through thickets of tall grass and pale trees where the wind whistled soft, the kind of place where memories felt closer than the present. Once, near a rusted shed half swallowed by vines, the dog stopped. Stood still. Nora opened the creaking door. Inside were old bikes, a cracked baseball glove, and a box labeled Matt plus Alex, her brother's name, her father's. She didn't open the box right away, just stared at it, the way you stare at a wound that isn't bleeding anymore, but still hurts. That night, after the wind died down, she sat beside the dog on the porch, stars above, silence around. She whispered her brother's name, first time in years. No one else to hear it but the dog. She told herself she was only staying a few more days, just long enough to clear things, just long enough to… What? Say goodbye? She didn't know, but every morning he waited by that door. Every night he curled near her feet. One morning, the power cut out. Cold air crept through the cracks. She built a fire, fumbling like she'd never done it before. He lay beside, the hearth like it was habit. And when the flames caught, his eyes softened. He sighed, as if everything was finally where it belonged again. Later that afternoon, a knock came at the door. First sound from the outside world in nearly a week. It was a man in his 60s. Neighbor, he said, lived 2 properties over. Called himself Roy. Kind, quiet type. Held a thermos of soup and a paper bag of groceries. Said he'd been checking in on the old place for years, especially after her uncle got sick. He looked down at the dog, whistled low. "Well, look who stayed," Roy said. Nora asked if he knew the dog's name. Used to be Scout. Think your uncle gave him that name after the kid left? His eyes dipped for a second. He waited on that porch 3 days straight after your uncle passed. then started living like he ran the place. Scout. The name fit. It felt lived in. Roy stayed for a bit. Talked about how her uncle never let go of family, even if he didn't always know how to show it. Said her brother had been here once, years ago, but didn't stay long. He was looking for something, Roy said, or maybe just hoping someone would find him. After Roy left, she sat on the porch with Scout again. The stars were out. Windless. Quiet. That night, she dreamed of her brother standing by the shed, younger than she remembered, waving but saying nothing. She woke with tears in her eyes, and Scout pressed close to her side. The next few days, something began to shift. Scout moved slower. He didn't meet her at the door in the morning. Didn't eat as much. The limp worsened. One day, he didn't follow her into the woods. Just sat by the porch, watching her with those steady, endless eyes. She called the local vet. A woman named Dr. Hale came by, checked him over gently, like she knew him already. Maybe she did. He's old, she said softly. Really old. But he's not in pain. Not yet. He's just tired. Nora nodded, but the words didn't land all at once. Scout slept. Longer now. Sometimes she had to check if he was still breathing. Each time, her heart paused. One evening, she opened the box from the shed. Inside were 2 flashlights, a stack of comics, a small red baseball cap, and a letter. It was addressed to her, from her brother. She read it by the fire. Scout's head, resting against her foot. He wrote about leaving, about needing space, about how the house held too many ghosts. But he said her uncle was kind in his own way. Quiet. Never judged. Just gave him a place to rest when the world felt too heavy. He mentioned Scout, too. Said he doesn't pick sides. He just stays. Nora folded the letter slowly, stared into the flames. For once, her mind was still. That night, Scout didn't move from his spot near the hearth. Not when she stood. Not when she whispered his name. He was asleep. Deeply asleep. She sat beside him on the floor, placed a hand on his side, felt the rise and fall, stayed there, listening. The next morning, he didn't get up. Nora found him just before sunrise, still, curled in front of the cold hearth. His breathing was shallow, eyes half open but not seeing. For a moment, she thought, maybe he was already gone. But no, he stirred slightly when she knelt beside him. She rested a hand on his side. It took a full minute before he sighed and blinked. "Hey," she whispered. "I'm here." She didn't move him, just stayed close. The morning passed slow and quiet. Birds called outside. A branch tapped against the window. The house creaked like it was holding its breath. Every sound felt louder in the stillness. Scout didn't eat, didn't drink, just lay there, barely aware, his old body giving in. Nora called Dr. Hale again, voice low. She didn't need to say much. The vet said she'd come by in the afternoon. Hours passed. Nora didn't do anything. Didn't check her phone. Didn't pack. She just sat on the floor, her back against the wall, knees pulled close, and eyes on the rise and fall of the one living thing that never gave up on this place. She thought about the first time she saw him, sitting on the porch like a memory, how he'd led her through the halls, through grief, through silence. She wondered how long he'd waited for someone to come back. Dr. Hale arrived just after 3. She knelt gently beside Scout, checked him, smiled, softly. "He's ready," she said. Nora nodded. No fight left in her. Just wait. The process was quiet, peaceful. Scout barely reacted, as if he'd already left half of himself behind. The rest followed without struggle. After, the vet gave Nora a hand on the shoulder, a look that didn't need words. Then she left her alone. Nora didn't cry right away. She sat beside Scout's body for a long time, fingers in his fur, the house around her now impossibly quiet. The silence wasn't empty, though. It was full. Full of memories she hadn't lived but somehow felt. Full of things left unsaid but understood. That evening, the clouds rolled in again. No rain, just the kind of gray that made the world look soft around the edges. She knew where to take him. It took most of the afternoon to dig the spot. Beneath the old tree out back, the one Scout always sat under, even before she realized it had been his place. The soil was tough. Rocks, roots. Her hands blistered, back sore. But she didn't stop. When it was done, she wrapped him in a soft blanket from the guest room. One of the few things that still held warmth. She carried him carefully. Pressed, her forehead to his before she laid him down. There was no ceremony, no words, just the sound of dirt falling, soft and final. She placed one of the old photos, the one of her uncle and brother at the lake, inside a jar and tucked it into the earth. A way of saying, someone remembers now. That night, the fire crackled. Again. But it didn't feel like a house full of ghosts anymore. Just one, filled with stories. Nora didn't leave the next day, or the day after that. Instead, she opened more doors, cleaned out the back rooms, a little each day. Sometimes she'd find something small, a handwritten recipe, an old letter, a receipt for a birthday cake from years ago. Each one a thread, pulling her deeper into a history she'd once run from. She made a habit of walking to the tree each morning. Not for any reason, just to sit. Some days she talked. Most days she didn't. Scout's grave was simple. No stone, just a flat piece of wood carved with his name. But she knew the spot by heart, knew the shape of the tree above it, knew the feeling of the wind when it passed through the leaves. One morning, she found herself cooking a full breakfast. Eggs, toast, even coffee in the old percolator. She set 2 bowls down by the hearth before she remembered he wasn't there anymore. She sat down anyway and smiled. A week passed. Then 2. The days moved softer, slower. Nora stopped checking how long she'd been there. She wasn't rushing to leave anymore. She started sleeping in the master bedroom, the one her uncle had used. She opened the curtains every morning. Let the sun in. Sometimes the breeze carried in the smell of pine and old wood, and it didn't feel heavy. It felt alive. She kept finding things. One day, behind a loose board in the hallway closet, she found a bundle of taped-together VHS cassettes labeled with her name. The handwriting was rough, but familiar. She didn't own a player, but Roy did. He brought it over without asking questions, just plugged it in and left her alone. She sat, on the floor, knees hugged to her chest, as the screen flickered. Home videos. A young girl laughing as a boy splashed into a creek. Her brother. Her. A dog running across the screen, barking joyfully. Scout, years younger. Her uncle behind the camera, chuckling. Hold still, Matt. Nora, wave to the camera. She hadn't heard her uncle's voice in a decade. Hearing it now, gentle and amused, was like being touched by something from the other side of time. The tape ended. Then another played. Then another. Hours passed, and when the screen finally turned blue, she sat in the quiet for a long time. Not crying, not overwhelmed, just still. That night, she left the porch light on, just like her uncle had, just like Scout always waited beside it. Not for anyone coming home, but for the memories that already had. A month later, Roy helped her plant flowers around Scout's grave. Nothing fancy, just wild flowers and lavender. She'd found them in old packets in a drawer by the kitchen window, Scout's favorite spot when the light poured in. As the breeze moved the petals, Nora ran her fingers across the wooden marker. The name was fading slightly. She liked it that way, like it had always been there. She found herself talking to Scout now and then, telling him things she hadn't told anyone, about her fears, her brother, the guilt she'd buried under years of silence, the ache of growing up and away from the people who loved you. The house wasn't empty anymore, not even when she was alone. One evening, she opened the attic. It was mostly dust and forgotten boxes, but in one corner, she found a large, folded piece of paper. When she laid it out, she realized it was a hand-drawn map. The property, the trails, the trees, and marked in red ink, Scout's paths. Little arrows, notes like sunny at 10 a.m. or berries here in spring. Dozens of small details. Only someone watching the dog closely would have known. Her uncle's handwriting again, and at the bottom corner, in case someone ever needs to find their way back. She pressed her hand to the page, felt something in her chest loosen. She stayed the whole summer, fixed the back porch, cleaned the windows, painted the shutters. Sometimes she'd hear paws on the floor when there were none. A soft thump on the stairs, a sigh near the hearth. Not ghosts, just echoes. Good ones. One morning in early fall, she stood at the tree where Scout lay and whispered a simple thank you. For waiting, for remembering, for knowing the house better than she ever did. Because it was never just a house. It was a heart, waiting to be felt again. And Scout. Scout had always known the way. Dogs truly are the most loyal companions in our lives. What did you think of this heartwarming story? Let us know in the comments. Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Click here to watch the next story of love, loyalty, and the incredible bond we share with our paw-some friends.